friends. So, the guest I have joining me today is some person that I never thought I would have this opportunity to talk to. But the more we've kind of been communicating via email leading up to this, I realized that that was kind of silly of me. This is a really awesome, approachable person. But given his pedigree, I was admittedly a little intimidated. But he's here and he has been here for a long time. He's been kicking around the photography industry for a minute and he has some legendary status. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and many other things, I'm sure, because he has a lot of wisdom to share. I assume, just based on the breadth of his work. He works in editorial, he works in branding, he works in all sorts of places, but what he is at his core is a photographer. And I love that he definitely has a niche, and that is wedding photography. But he's kind of everywhere because he doesn't niche himself, which is so beautiful. Yeah, so the person who is here today, drum roll, please. It's John Dolan. John Dolan. Welcome to the show. Hi, John.
Hey,
Thanks for being here.
of course. It's great to speak with you, Bobby.
I was just telling folks in my intro about you that I was a little bit surprised that I got to hear from you, or that you agreed to come on the show. When
Why?
some go ahead. Well, we kind of put people in certain places that we like. Well, maybe that person would never talk to me. You know what I mean?
Right,
Um,
right. Yeah, no, I think it's great just to say yes. And I think it's interesting you have a great topic to speak about. And I think it's good for me to have to put things into sentences instead of just vaguely think about things. And yeah.
do you mean like in terms of how you digest, like how you reflect on stuff, or do you mean just being able to chat with people?
I think it's a lot of squeezing the essence of things into this little. Um, I wake up in the middle of the night a lot with a realization, and
Oh,
I've started to write them down because they're good and they're gems. And you, uh, it's like the days are very busy, and then at night everything just sort of goes into a kind of simplified form. And I also like talking to photographers. I think there's so many people working in their own spaces and trying to figure it out, and there's no guidebook. So
yeah.
um, it's why not share what you've learned? And
Yeah, and I love that you say that because I think a lot of us, especially in the education sphere, we try to pretend like there's a guidebook, and that there's one way to do things. Not that there's not guidebooks, but I think a lot of my career I've spent thinking that there's a right and a wrong,
yeah,
and that's really, really limiting.
it is. I think I lucked out in college and had a professor who was obsessed with teaching us that the question is much more important than the answer.
Oh, wow.
And I never really understood what he was talking about
Mhm.
until Google. And I realized with Google, the more you define the question, the more the answer is. So he was always trying to get us to define the question when we were trying to get an answer to something and we didn't even know what we were asking.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think I think with photography, we're always trying to photograph something, but we don't necessarily know what we're really photographing. We're
Yeah,
often photographing the surface, but
yeah,
there's so much beneath it. And so when I teach, I like to mostly raise questions. And
yeah.
I'm sure it's super frustrating to students, but I think it's more valuable. And to sort of say that I'm not going to you're not going to walk away from this retreat or this workshop with any answers, but you might have more clearly defined questions, and you might know that the answers are out there for you to find, but we're
Mhm.
so we're so targeted to, get the correct answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even with how we educate students, right? Like there's a right and a wrong, and like you can study to find the like I remember figuring that out in terms of our tests, like knowing what is going to be on a test
Yeah.
and just like knowing the answer because I just wanted to have that approval that this was right or wrong. It's just so much more safe, right? Than only having questions.
Yes, and I think in some ways it's helped me to be a good teacher that I was a terrible student. I would, I knew, I just, standard education was not my normal way of learning. So
Mhm.
I skipped school a lot and learned a lot more out in the world. So
Mhm.
um, I being a photographer is that isolating path. You have to perform, you're responsible for everything in the camera, every part of the frame,
Mhm.
uh, and uh, that puts a lot of responsibility on the photographer.
Mhm. What are some of the questions you ask yourself?
Oh, certainly at this point in my life, I don't think a lot when I shoot, but
Mm.
I my senses are really on high alert when I'm really working well, um, and that's certainly a lovely thing that's come with age, that I can actually see down the road what's coming. And
Mhm. Mhm.
because of experience, it doesn't make me fall into a pattern. It just, I have a sense of what's about to happen, and I
Mhm.
can relax in that state and be ready to try something new. So certainly with weddings, because I've done it for so many years, that it's the most relaxing kind of performance that I can do. The
Oh,
way,
wow.
you see an old jazz guy or an old blues guy just
Mhm.
pick up a guitar and start playing. That's the feeling I get now when I photograph, and it's so lovely because I'm not burned out, I'm not bored, I'm
Mhm.
just really comfortable with my instrument, and
Mhm.
it allows me a lot of flexibility. And I heard some comedian talking about the great comics are really relaxed when they're riffing. They're
Yeah.
not tight, and they're not, pushing hard for the punchline.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
allow pauses, and that's a similar feeling to, to when I photograph in a good place.
Yeah, it sounds like you can anticipate what's happening, right? Is that the right word or?
I'm not, if your brain's a pie chart, I'm not spending, there's not a huge part of my brain that's worrying
Mhm.
or anxious or calculating exposure or all these things.
Right.
Kind of this a pie chart of just absorbing and seeing thought bubbles in people's brains. And you can walk into a room that's very packed with emotion, and um, you can sense what people are feeling, and that's kind of a beautiful thing, to be able to read human emotions. And I've been thinking lately, like, I've become fluent in body language.
Nice.
You can see how somebody's standing, or somebody who hasn't taken a breath for a while, they're just so tense, and then you take that into consideration and treat them in a certain way.
Yeah. Do you find that you mirror for them what you are?
That's a good question, because I definitely am a vocal mimic. If I'm around some Southerners, I'll get a little twang on, and I pick up when I go to the movies. If it's a certain accent, I come out with that. But I think I have a temperament that's pretty neutral. So I like to be that kind of neutron in the electronic equation, and
Yeah.
I take away some stress by
Yeah.
being uh, not a chart. Some photographers come into a room and they're so charged, and they bring so much energy into it. And that was never me. So when I had jobs where I had to bring that energy, it was really hard.
Mhm.
And when I found weddings, it's like, oh, it's an advantage to be subtle.
Mhm.
It's an advantage to be calm and just kind of, you're Switzerland.
Yeah.
You're just chill. And so, then if a video crew comes in and they're all amped up, it's just like,
Mhm.
dude, bring it down.
Yeah, it's different vibes.
Very different vibes. I don't want to be mean to videographers. I've got loads of friends who are videographers, but
No, no, not at all. It is it's
they have
I
to work
tried
harder than me.
videoing this year and oh my God, it
Yeah,
is hard.
yeah.
Is this something that you like consciously developed? Or
No,
did you kind of notice it after it had been settling in for a bit?
I think it's the opposite. I think I was drawn to weddings because they suited me.
How so?
So, I'm from a big family. I'm the youngest of a big family, so every wedding is sort of like my childhood. People getting dressed, people rushing, people losing things. That was my childhood. So it's very comfortable space for me.
Yeah.
Um, and people forget that I'm there just like when I was a kid. So it's, I think if you're lucky enough to align with your natural talents, then it's a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, I certainly had jobs where I was the wrong photographer for that job.
Mhm.
And those were painful experiences to, fail gloriously. And, but you turn it and go, oh, that's not for me. But look, I have this superpower in this other realm.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah,
I
true.
started, nobody wanted to do weddings. So it was all
Mhm.
there for me. So
Mhm.
very
And how long
much.
ago, just to clarify for our listeners, how long ago did you start?
I would say, let's just say 1990,
Yeah. Yeah.
early 90s, I really got going.
Yeah.
Um, and in the New York in the 90s, it was the lowest form of photography to do. So it was not respected. It was just kind of like this cousin over in the corner. The fashion guys were, the corporate guys were cool, the ad guys, the photojournalists, and then the weddings were just
Yeah.
really pathetic. So it made it I mean it made it wide open for reinvention and discovery, um, and there were a lot of really interesting people getting married. So they all found myself. I had a couple buddies I shared a studio with, and
Mhm.
a very small group of us in the 90s really embraced it.
Mhm. What do you think that says about the growth of the industry?
Well, I always think that I mark time with 1995 when Martha Stewart started her wedding magazine,
Mhm.
and I was in the first issue, and my career exploded after that. But I always think one year everyone should just write Martha a thank you note, because without her, there's no wedding industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
She changed things for sure.
it really was it just because she hired non-wedding people to work for her magazine, um, and I was a magazine photographer
Mhm.
shooting a few weddings a year, and um, even the still life photographers she used were not wedding photographers.
Mhm.
So she raised the whole level of it up from just kind of the basic wedding at the country club to these, really thought out picture stories and 12-page spreads about cakes and uh,
Mhm.
flowers, and she featured real weddings. So nobody that ever featured a real wedding before her magazines. So all of a sudden, people would tear those magazines apart, save them, look up your phone number in the back, and pre-internet, that was the whole deal right there. And maybe it was a quarterly or twice a year, but when that magazine came out, it was just, if you were featured in that, you'd be set. You'd get
Yeah.
weddings from it.
Well, it's interesting to know that context.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it like that. I started in I think I second shot for a few weddings in like 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't really have my own wedding until 2010. And it's funny when you say, what questions are you asking? I'm going to do a editing session with Holger uh,
Oh gosh,
next
well, he
week.
was there with me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really serendipitous that this came at this time.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're
and
coming to Brooklyn.
I'm coming to Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm gonna hang out with Holger. And I've been looking through all my work, and that's what he's asking me. He's like, "You took that photo for a reason. What is it?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"You're right." But getting into that headspace of really intentionally understanding what it is that you're looking at and like why you're drawn to that and what fascinates you about this rather than like trying to impress some stereotype or expectation or something like that onto your work
Right.
is a wholly different process.
Well, there's a simple dividing line between people who take pictures and people who make photographs.
Hmm.
And it's fine that people who just are doing it to pay the mortgage and they're just shooting 20 or 30 weddings a year and not worrying about it too much. But then there are these people who have something specific they want to see at each wedding and say at each wedding. And uh, I just think it's such a powerful human study every weekend.
Yeah.
So one of our other friends, Meredith Hewer, came up with this amazing line that being a wedding photographer is like being a street photographer in a really friendly town.
Yeah, that's
So it's like
awesome.
come up to you and like take my picture,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
were all street photographers, all just we're always photographing, but there's nowhere like a wedding where people are looking good and they're open and you have special status as a photographer. You're kind of a really key player. And we're certainly on a kind of mission to elevate the whole genre, or as much elevate the people who want to come up and make something amazing, because it's a glorious time in weddings. The budgets are crazy.
Hmm. Hmm.
What we made in the 90s was nothing. And Um, but if it's just about the money, it's just going to be a new set of cheesy pictures.
Yeah.
But there's certain photographers who are embracing that powerful storyline and really digging into what goes on at a wedding.
Hmm.
And also, my other mission is to sort of stretch out um, there's sort of a narrow bandwidth of what's most photographers show at a wedding, which is just
Hmm.
the happy and the pretty and
Right.
the romantic and all that, which is fine, but it's also a little bit narrow. So
Hmm.
I'm really interested in what else is there to be discovered. I want to see somebody completely reinvented or turned
Hmm.
upside down, or
Hmm.
uh, and I compared it to kind of 70s soft rock. There are a lot of wedding pictures are like soft rock.
Yeah,
And it's like,
totally.
where's the punk? Where's the crazy
Yeah.
experimental music? Um,
Yeah. Where's
because
the psych rock?
yeah, try
Yeah,
it.
100%. I totally agree with that. Yeah, and it's all radio edits, like even just the portraits. I've seen, like, I definitely have always leaned toward documentary photography, and I started in photojournalism, and that's what I saw when I walked into a wedding, and I always felt really uncomfortable because I knew I wanted to be there, but it wasn't right. I didn't have the skills or the confidence
Mm.
to just dive in and shoot what I saw because I perceived there were so many conventions around expectations, right? And 10, 12 years in, I'm finally, kind of in the last 3 or 4 years, I'm finally starting to shake that off. But for anybody who is um, not interested in the superficial kind of 6 hours that you swoop in and do your thing and walk out, there's so much more that we need to ask ourselves
Well, I even
in
think,
order to do it.
yeah, I even think beyond documentary. I don't think it's an either or. Either cheesy wedding pictures or documentary is the
Hmm.
end all. I think there's a million variations in between and beyond. And um, I mean, I think I'm a terrible documentary person. I don't think I sit in one place in wedding photography. I think my
Mhm.
pictures are very reactive and intuitive and sensual, and I miss the story sometimes. And I was not a good photojournalist because I I'm much more interested in short stories than in
Yep.
stories. Or documentary just seems so objective and so dry for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
I'm
think that's where
much
we get
more
mixed up a little
involved.
bit between photojournalism and documentary. And people are now using all of these things interchangeably, like
Yeah,
candid documentary, photojournalism. Like they're not. They're
yeah,
entirely different genres, right? Like documentary is the art of story,
yeah,
whereas photojournalism is I am following a writer's script and I'm creating an image that fits what the writer is saying. It's much more um boxed in. Even in documentary, the photographer or the writer has much more like say in what they're attracted to and what story they are telling, and then of course candid is on top of that. But
or even just the simple thing that, from my point of view, documentary and photojournalism are saying this is what happened
mhm,
and this is what it looked like. And from my point of view, I'm giving a narrative that's sort of saying this is what it felt like. I don't know what it
yeah,
looked like because I was too busy. I was so full of emotion, but this is the feeling I drove home with.
yeah,
And so that's the expansive thing that I'm trying to throw out to people. Like, it doesn't have to be so literal, or you don't have to do your book saying, this is Janie and Bob, and this is them getting ready, and this is da, da, da. You could
yeah,
throw in some interpretive things of what else happened, and
yeah,
uh, but it's I think the your reaction to the conventional is healthy, and we should all just careful about what workshops you take that where you learn the 10 steps to make successful wedding pictures.
totally,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not really the way to do it. Well, it's
yeah.
almost like
Not for everybody. Yeah,
yeah, I think that I keep playing with what the idea of what the role of the photographer is, because it's so specialized and it's not a normal um, business. It's not
yeah,
a growth business. You're a live performer. You're a court jester. You know, you're you have to be on that day. You can't be sick. You have to be, you know, uh, really making something special that on that one day. So you're much closer to like a live singer or a juggler or whatever it is. But you can't just follow normal business practices.
yeah. I never thought of it like that of being a performer. Huh.
Show up and you got to deliver.
Yeah, it's true.
And also I'm sure how you walk into the room makes people smile. You affect people.
Yeah.
and and so when I see photographers come in all business like, and they're all pumped up, and they go right to work, it's like you might want to soften up and get people used to your presence, because it's kind of intense, and
Mm.
um, it's a long day, and you gotta, I don't know, I just think you have to be human first, and
Yeah.
um, can't just go full force all the time.
Hmm. Yeah. Are those some of like when, sorry, you had said something that led me to think about the title of your book, like Perfectly Imperfect. So how sometimes we were talking about how there's a narrative and then there's maybe people are perceiving right and wrong, but you are trying to be more expansive. When that, because when you look at your work, the first time I looked at your book, I didn't see it. And I'm like, there were some images that hit me, and I was like, right on. And then I was looking through it again, and I'm like, hmm. But then I kept coming back to it, and I was like, what is this? What is this? Because there's some sort of there's they're not stories per se, but you're right, they are definitely evoking feelings, and that kind of like took me by surprise because again, I'm trying to break out of this box that I've kind of been putting myself in over the last few years. And I felt it when I looked at your stuff. And looking at your work led into a whole portal of a whole bunch of other photographers who are trying to do a similar thing. Excuse
So
me.
did you think that the pictures were not giving you the answer?
They were not
You're
giving me the
you're
answer.
like, I'm not sure what's this picture about.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I figured out is like, oh, I'm just supposed to sit with this. Or like, maybe I should just sit with this and like think about what is it? What is it about this? You
You know,
know?
somebody wrote me that their maybe 6-year-old son was going through the
Mhm.
book and he was making up stories on
Oh,
every picture. And I thought, like, that's the greatest book review I could ever wish for. The kid was
wow.
like, oh,
100%.
that the pictures are there, they're questions rather than answers. Or
Yeah.
they're just kind of something on a platter saying, look at this, how does it make you feel? And I'm not telling you, and this is a little bit of my battle with a lot of photography where they tell you in the caption and they tell you in the picture and they just want to manipulate your emotions into just loving these people so much who are so much in love. And
Yeah.
I get it, but I think it's a slippery slope that and it's just that it just doesn't, it's just a little sugary sweet for my taste. So I'm I, I'm I'm compelled to sort of share this thing saying some people feel a lot more emotions at their wedding than they're telling you.
Mm-hmm.
I love talking to people after their wedding and
Mm-hmm.
saying, what was your ride like? Was it, did you, and sometimes people describe this thing of going from anxiety to ecstasy, but it
Yeah.
was a wild 8 hours or 10 hours or 2 days and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's um, that's kind of my realization after all these years is that the wedding industry is saying you're going to feel so happy on your wedding day, whether you like it or not. And I'm saying photographers don't fall for that and don't continue that myth because it's such a huge amount of pressure on people who get a little bit melancholy on their wedding and go, oh my God, I can't show this on Instagram. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want my
Yeah.
friends to know that I was sad somewhere in between my, ceremony and reception.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like Sunday night blues or, you
Yeah.
know, it's all
Yeah.
part of
And it's interesting how quickly people turn away from emotion, right? Like if even if a parent is crying or something like we're we're being bashful about what we're willing to show at a place where like this is one place in the world where it's totally safe to show or I would hope that you're with all the people that love you and you're going to be feeling all sorts of things and yet we still have this shell that we want to slip into when we are being sad or like overly boisterous or like just really feeling our emotions, you know? We don't as a society we don't really support that very well.
yeah, but it's a incredibly what's the word? It just fills me up so much when people give me the permission to be inside the family, even
Yeah.
when they know that things are going to happen and they're not negatively affected by my presence. They're like,
Hmm.
and then when I show them these pictures, they're grateful that I
Hmm.
didn't flinch. And um, I just think it's like that embracing the honesty of the spectrum of the day is really courageous um, and clients want it. Cool
Hmm.
clients want it, and it's not that hard to find cool clients because if you show it, they will come.
Exactly. I was just going to say that if you show it, they'll come for sure. Was that one of your big shifts? What was kind of what led you into this frame of mind where you're at
Uh,
now?
well, I was thinking about the shifts in anticipation of this, and I think that came up with some of my fabulous failures were
Yeah.
really great shifts. And I alluded to one where it was an editorial job for a great magazine with an amazing creative director who,
Mhm.
I always wanted to work for. And he gave me 2 assignments, and I was at the airport flying to Ireland on a payphone calling him, and he just said, "Yeah, you didn't get it, buddy. You didn't, both, we're killing both the stories. You just didn't get it."
Oh,
And it
wow.
was so devastating. And I'm going to on Christmas vacation, and I'm just like, get the grade from the teacher going, "You got an F."
Yeah.
And it was, it kind of just destroyed me, but it made me let go of that part of the ambition of being this kind of New York Times Magazine photographer and serious conceptual whatever it was. I'm and it made me realize my superpowers were not having a script and not having to prepare and direct. And it was when I realized I was an indirector rather than a director.
Oh, I like that.
For those magazine photographers, you need to be, a really strong voice and a authoritative kind of preparation. And I realized I'm the inverse of that
Mhm.
I go in empty and I let the story come to me. And so it was hard, but it made me embrace my strengths and let go of my weaknesses. And just so sometimes you learn more by what you're bad at. um,
Mhm.
and I realized I was better working with women, photographing women, and photographing situations where I was uh, less in control.
Leading up to that assignment, did you think that that was something that you wanted? Like, was that something that you
Oh
had kind of
yeah,
gone
that
for?
was the
Yeah.
dream. Yeah,
Yeah.
you show a book of portraits around, and I remember dropping it off at this guy's office, or going into his meeting, and he just went through my book and loved it and said, "We're definitely going to work together."
Mhm.
But it yeah, I think I still don't know what happened, except
Mhm.
it wasn't my sweet spot.
Yeah. Did
I
you
survived.
when that started to settle in, did it take you some time to come to the realization that
Oh
you were
yeah,
meant for other things? Yeah.
yeah,
What was that
yeah,
process like?
yeah. It was all. I mean, I've had a long career of magazine work and advertising and weddings, and it was kind of a 30-30-30 deal. Uh,
Mhm.
and different times, magazines would get become more of the year, and advertising would go down, and then but weddings were kind of this constant. And also, I was never trying hard to get weddings. It was all just friends and photo editors and writers and people I knew who just, I was just the guy. So it wasn't a complicated thing. But I also had a long run doing catalog fashion for Robert Redford's company. And that was
Mhm.
just a purely joyful, uh, an incredible crew. We were on the road together for 8 years and just making kind of standard pictures of the clothes, but we would also get to make these cover shots that were just so magnificent, and
Mhm.
landscapes with people in them, but out west, and weather, and uh, narrative storytelling
Mhm.
in a fashion sense. Uh,
Mhm.
so that kind of, one the old cliche of one door closing and another door opens. I think that job came up right after the other one closed. So,
Nice.
you know, I think it's somehow found to embrace the sensuality of my pictures and the softer side, and let go of the kind of harder hitting stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, and especially as a guy, men are particularly expected to be have a certain energy and a certain hardness, right?
Yeah, I never had that.
Did you know that you didn't have it? Like, were you comfortable not having it, or did you feel like
Well, I knew that I couldn't light. I skipped lighting this. I never learned how to light.
Yeah.
So, when you have that deficit, I learned how to find light really quickly.
Okay.
So I'm extremely good at finding light with a, literal gun to my head or with a figurative gun to my head.
Hmm.
So um, I think I learned all these other skills. I learned how to make people comfortable in my presence and not be intimidating because I ended up not doing many CEO corporate shots, and I ended up doing these more intense stories for magazines about someone who had overcome some complicated medical thing, or and I realized that the subtlety was an asset and the non-intrusive nature was an asset. So,
Hmm.
it's like, how do you analyze yourself as a person and as a photographer and say, I'm terrible at this, I'm really good at this.
Hmm.
So, um, I mean, that was definitely kind of the only meditation I ever really did on my career was, what's the one thing you're good at, that in a city full of photographers. When I first moved to New York, uh, maybe I'd been there for years, but I had this realization: I get really calm around nervous people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the middle of chaos, I just kind of go like this, and it's kind of weird, but it's really helpful at a wedding when all hell's breaking loose. Okay, I'm not I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna. Uh, I'm not gonna break in the wind. I'll just bend, or go.
Yeah.
So how do you? I think everybody should do that trick of kind of going and so what's your little weird superpower, and
Hmm.
how do you incorporate that into your
Hmm.
approach?
When did you realize that was your superpower?
That was fairly early. I think after my brother's wedding,
Hmm.
uh, in the late 80s, I realized, like,
Hmm.
oh, this could be really good for me. But I didn't
Hmm.
know what a wedding photographer was. So I just, that was when I just started volunteering to shoot friends' weddings for $500.
Hmm.
Uh, and it was a very happy place because
Absolutely.
I was part of the party. I wasn't, this was before there were shot lists, before there were
Hmm.
expectations. All I
Hmm.
had to do was show up and be part of the party, and just, it
Hmm.
was really easy when there weren't any expectations.
Hmm.
A
Were
lot
you
more now.
were you ever at risk of being on that like expectation train? Were
No,
there moment, yeah.
no,
How do you
because
think?
I think that all happened when blogs came in
Mhm,
2008 or whenever it was, or 2006. And I was already, I'd already been doing it for 15 years.
mhm.
So, um, and wedding planners learned quickly that I would always forget to do the details, but the couple was always happy, so it was never a problem.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I feel for the expectations on people's, uh, the pressure on people now is incredible.
Yeah, it's shifted, hey?
Terrible, really terrible. I see the anxiety people have, um, and I mean, I spend a lot of time when I teach in trying to somehow relieve that anxiety and just say, don't work for you. You have to lure people into your approach and then get them to trust you. And once you have trust, then you can make art. But if people
Mhm.
are second guessing you and showing you Pinterest pages and giving you 6-page shot lists, you
Yeah,
can't, that's a really brutal place to be.
absolutely. I think part of the dissonance also happens though because oftentimes people pick up a camera to make money,
Right.
right? And then maybe at some point they realize that they're actually an artist.
Yeah.
Um, but there's such a quagmire of all of those different point of views in the wedding industry. of people who are doing this as an industry, like as a job, and then there are people who've picked up their camera because they're just drawn to expressing themselves in that with that medium.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think I'm always talking to the 10% of people who want to do it for art's sake, um and the wedding industry sucks in a lot of uh financial, it's just such an industry, it's such a credible, uh it can really mess with your head. The money can get into your brain, and uh I love supporting people who are in small towns in the Midwest and just want to become that a pure photographer in their little circle, and they
mhm,
don't want to be part of the big photo world. And it's very tempting and all, but if you could have a career of making 10, 20 years of pictures in your own community without getting
mhm.
warped by the whole game, it could be really gratifying.
Yeah, I'm totally. Once I started embracing more of my role as like a sociologist or like as a family historian,
Yeah.
everything became so much more fulfilling. Like I was talking about how uncomfortable I was when I first started, but there was something in it that I loved. I loved weddings. And I would later figure out that it was an opportunity to understand the world in a way I had never experienced before, like in terms of how I had grown up and my exposure to what family meant, going to a wedding, like you were talking about how it was familiar to you. To me, it was Mars. Like I didn't understand what was going on, but I loved it. Like I just felt so fascinated by all of these people, and I just wanted to soak in everything that they were soaking up or that they were sharing.
It's so interesting what draws people to weddings, because I think it weeds people out pretty quickly if you're not really obsessed with it, because it's a
Mhm.
hard day, and it's an intense amount of pressure and all that sort of stuff. But it's lovely to see that you took that the Martian approach and embraced what was unfamiliar, and um, because that gives you a certain power, that you're seeing things as if it's a foreign land.
Yeah, yeah, foreign language for sure. I'm much more comfortable with it now because I've been witnessing it for a long time, like, and even
Yeah.
in knowing my own superpower, like understanding what I'm bringing for them and being able to use that in terms of being able to connect with people who would really appreciate how I see things or how I produce things for them.
Where do you
But
live, Bob?
I live in a small town in southern British Columbia.
Amazing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty special little place. It's in the middle of these three mountain ranges, and the nearest city is Spokane, Washington,
Yeah.
which is like 3 hours south of us.
Yeah.
But it's really beautiful. So there's lots of weddings here. But it's also a small town, and there are lots of big family weddings and big reunions, and even if it's a destination, people are coming in from all over to stay a while. So being able to witness, I think this is something that gets lost in the industry as well, is that we are we are witnessing a piece of um not just our culture, but like us as humanity.
Yeah.
Like families are the basis of our society. And here there's families coming together, right? And never again will this ever happen.
Yeah.
So when we only look at it from a shotless perspective,
Such a
no,
waste.
yeah, yeah, it's such a
I
lost
had some,
opportunity.
I did a magazine job probably 20 years ago, and I sent the people pictures after it was a family reunion at an Adirondack lodge,
Mhm.
for Travel and Leisure magazine. So I kind of hung out with this family for a couple days and photographed them and made all these pictures. But I got an email from one of the sons-in-law in the story that the grandmother had passed away. So this is 20 years later. I've been in contact with him a little bit, but
Hmm.
the fact that he contacted me because I had this group picture of them that was so glorious, and it represented that one time when they all got together, uh, and it's happened. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of photographers that you have that picture of Uncle Bob,
Hmm.
and uh, they want to use it for the funeral
The funeral
brochure,
card, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's I think about that at every wedding, that at some point I'm going to get a picture of somebody, and
Hmm.
it's going to represent that peak moment in their life where they felt good and looked good,
Yeah,
uh, and it's a lot of why I don't direct at weddings. I want the energy to come from Uncle Bob rather than me telling him how to stand.
totally, totally.
And if you sit down and sit back and watch the show, you can see who's really having a ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you get to watch the watchers, and you
Yeah,
get to
yes.
like see people go through like peaks and valleys of extroversion.
I love the
And like,
watchers.
yeah.
Yes.
Or like seeing how the parents um I have like specific parent faces, like every parent does this, like with the double chin, and they pull it back. And I give that photo to almost all of my clients, and they always love it, and the parents always hate it because it's a double chin, right? So I have this like crusade against double chins. Because that is pride, that
Yeah.
is love, that is like unabashed joy and like hope for your kids,
Yeah.
all in that double chin.
Well, I think there is a collection of these things that wedding photographers have seen, and it's a shared thing. Whenever I'm with a group of wedding photographers, like the realizations and the insights people have had, because you're basically you're on surveillance mode so intensely for the whole
Mhm,
weekend, and you can't help but learn things about human nature and about fragility and pain, and people who won't let go of something. Or I'm
mhm.
seeing a lot recently of divorced parents who were just letting go and
Yeah,
coming together for the couple, and it's like, and the older I've gotten, the more I'm really in tune with the father of the bride or the father of the
right.
groom, and
Yeah.
that's fascinating to see. And you could see in the planning process, at some point, it's like you got to talk to the ex, and you got to just say, let's just cut this out. And
Mhm.
then the bride hasn't seen the parents in the same room for 15 years, and there they are. So it's how can you not be fascinated by that stuff, and enriched by it? I always come home just to hug my wife, saying we're fine.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
need the big house. Or uh, you know it's you learn about what matters, and what uh, I think people get one chance in life where you get everybody you love in one place.
Mhm.
So don't mess it up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I find that people tend to rise to the challenge, you
Yeah,
know? So often I hear from my clients how worried they are about how their parents are going to behave.
it's such a waste. Yeah,
Mhm.
people are gonna have fun at your wedding.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. A glass of wine, okay.
Yeah.
Some music,
We did a good
maybe.
job here. Look at these kids. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I mean, it's interesting because I do have a theory that the future of wedding photography will be female, but I think that a lot of the photographers I've met in the last 10 years, there's just a huge amount of insight and subtlety and uh, empathy and all these great skills that are it's a great genre for women who understand complex emotions,
Mhm.
um, and embrace that, and
Mhm.
just it's my other big mission is to get the rest of the photo world to see how much talent there is in weddings. And if I was working at an ad agency, I would hire a wedding photographer and give them really complicated job and give them a stack of cash and say, what can you make out of this? And it's like we're Swiss Army knives, we're
Yeah.
ninjas, and I just don't think anybody knows how much creation there has been in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
Is it's an explosive industry with, I don't even know the stats on it, but if there's 2.4 million weddings a year, then that means there's a lot of
Hmm.
wedding photographers making those pictures at those weddings. I only do 10, so that leaves 2.3.
Whatever that math is, yeah.
Yeah, uh, but I've just met a lot of people who've done X number of weddings in the last 5 years, last 10 years, and they're having these breakthroughs, and I want the art world to see it. So
Hmm.
got to figure a way to.
Yeah, I agree. Was that part of the impetus of doing a book?
Um, the book is something I just worked on off season for 10 years, 15, I don't know, just forever. And I just had to I had to get it out there, to stake my ground as an early adopter, and to
Hmm.
it was just driving me insane not to have the book out there. But
Hmm.
nobody, I'd take it to publishers and they'd be like, why would people want to look at other people's wedding pictures? Like, this is
Yeah,
why I don't get this book.
exactly.
It was, uh, it was shockingly bleak to get your face, the door slammed in your face, the big publishing houses. But I think that, maybe in the pandemic, people saw that weddings actually mattered and or something we missed. And so it happened when it happened. But that thing that people say, it'll happen when it happens. It's really, really annoying to hear
I know
until it
it's so
happened. I'm
annoying.
like, okay, I get it. It was
All in good time.
uh,
What did it feel like to make it to have it happen? It sounds like you had to like kind of make it happen, right?
yeah, it was. I didn't believe it until I was on press with Holger. He met me
Mm.
in Italy, and seeing the pages come out of the press was,
Oh,
I have always heard this, but it was really true that it was actually happening. And when the shipment of books came to my house, that was another phase of just like,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm glad it's out there. I might do a second edition because it's all sold out, because people embraced it beautifully. And
Yeah.
yeah, so but it's something real. I get it. A book is so real, and five
Mhm.
pounds of reality. And
It's
uh,
amazing just sitting with it. Um, Thank you for doing that.
it was it was a true labor of love.
Thanks
And
for
it was,
taking one for the team, John.
well, the best thing was that the book designer I worked with, who was really a collaborator, she just said, go big. Like, don't.
Yeah,
She helped me edit the pictures, but um, I thought it had to be this number of pages. I mean, it's a big book.
it's a big book.
So, but I wanted each picture to stand on its own, and I didn't want to
Mm,
put in pictures that I saw. It it took a lot of iterations to get where it was, but I'm glad it got out there.
yeah,
Thank
yeah. We're all better for it, for sure. It's inspiring some of us, for sure, to do the same.
you. Yeah.
Was that a big shift for you?
Um, I think it solidified my place, because I've always been on the edge of the industry, but I
Mhm.
definitely went to one party in New York, a wedding industry party, and there was a way people approached me, or different. It was really interesting. It was subtle, but it was like, oh, guess they know how a book come out. And I think I had talked about it for so many years that people were kind of so sick of me talking about it that they were
Yeah.
happy that it came out. But um, yeah, I mean, it's that and the White House wedding, everything else is gravy from after that, those two things. So uh,
Hmm.
I've I've gotten from the wedding gods everything I've asked for. So
Did you consciously ask?
I asked for the White House wedding, absolutely,
Oh, you did.
absolutely,
The gods or the powers that be?
everything. Yeah,
Were were there stirrings that it was happening, and then you're like, I'm gonna go get that?
yeah, but in a very quiet way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I just put out messages to the universe, and also
Hmm.
I had met the bride at another wedding, so there'd been a face to face. So I made the connection, and I knew a lot of her friends. So
Hmm.
it was just, it was one of those things. If I hadn't gotten it, I would have been just devastated. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
was yours.
yeah.
You said riding the gravy train. So what is I have two questions for you. And I'm going to ask them so I don't forget, and then maybe we can both remember. One, what does the gravy train feel like to you now? And the other question is like what is that practice of asking the universe? Like what does that look like for you?
I didn't mean to, if I said gravy train, I didn't mean to say gravy train. I meant to
Did I
say
say gravy? Everything's been gravy. Sorry, I'm saying gravy train.
yes.
Sorry.
I think it's
Thanksgiving.
more that uh, everything else is does I'm not striving for anything else. I feel like I've gotten, on Christmas morning where you got everything you wanted and everything else
Hmm.
is just extra. Um,
Yeah.
um, and it looks like next year I'm shooting 4 weddings of friends of my daughters because my daughter's 28. So
Hmm.
it's like now it's just going to
Oh,
be a season of weddings where my daughter's going to have to give a speech at a wedding, which is
yeah.
just wild. And
Yeah.
so I think they'll just be a sweet season of that. But um, I definitely have a belief that you get the weddings that you're meant to get.
Hmm.
That if you don't get a wedding, there have been times where I got really bummed that I didn't get a certain wedding, but then I
Hmm.
got another one, or
Yeah.
took a wedding because I thought I needed the money, and then
Yeah.
I shouldn't have, and I didn't listen to my gut, and then somebody else
Hmm.
called. It would have been a better one. So
Yeah.
I've learned to just, you know, never beg for a wedding. It's like, uh, I'd love
Yeah.
to shoot your wedding, but if it doesn't work out, here's some great friends of mine, um,
Yeah.
and it's a much less stressful way to do it than to be like, oh my God, I have to get
Mhm.
this wedding.
Yeah.
That'll
Well,
drive
it's
people
funny
nuts.
because, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no.
Like
It's
people who are in that mindset of I have to get this wedding, that is less stress to them than letting it go. Right? And
right.
maybe that's an important shift for people to hear is that it is way more stressful to wish to nearly beg for a wedding than it is to just be like, nope, this isn't right for me.
Yeah.
Another one will come.
It's
Right?
and once you realize that um if you pick your number, whatever the number is, for me it's 10. That's asking the wedding gods for 10 cool people. Make
Mhm.
it 8 and then I'll find 2 of my own.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
We'll
so
collaborate on this.
I just think you can set that number and spread the word to your friends that you only want 5 cool weddings. I have 5
Mhm.
planners who know me really well, and they say, I've got one for you. So that gets
Mhm.
me to 5. And then friends of friends. And it's really not that hard to, set your sights a certain way and then believe that the universe will provide.
Right.
And then people sense that you're not desperate guy wanting a date on Friday night.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
good look.
It's a bit like dating, isn't it?
Oh, it's totally like
Yeah.
dating. If you yeah, if you have that sense that you're, I don't know, I was not good at dating, but I know the vibe that I don't want to be the desperate guy.
Totally. But yeah, like they're coming to your website and they're sort of like checking out your profile or like checking you out in the coffee shop sort of thing. And
Yes.
then that first interaction has got to be pretty smooth. We've got to like kind of size each other up a little bit. How's this going to go? And then you meet, and
Yeah.
then you're sizing each other up, talking about what you each offer. And then you're literally getting married. Like, it is so much like that.
Well, um, I wonder how that is for a woman because you have to be the seducer in a lot of ways as a business person.
Hmm.
When I meet couples, I'm trying to exude this kind of confident but not cocky, subtle. I'm putting the pictures out there, but I'm not begging for work. I'm just saying
Hmm.
this is one thing I'm really good at. So,
Yeah.
like these pictures, I like people who like me and
Yeah, I would say it's the same. That's certainly how I want to approach it for sure. I'd like to be kind of cool and be very clear about what it is that I provide. And if you're clear and you're honest and you're showing what you want to shoot, then the right people will
yeah.
and that dance is a lot easier. But in terms of like feeling like um seduction to me feels a little bit not dishonest, but not it's not forthright.
Yeah, and maybe it's not really seduction, but I guess by saying that I'm trying to say that the last thing I do at a first meeting, the last thing I would want to do at a first meeting is to be all biz.
Right. Here's my
So
contract.
yeah, or my approach to weddings is
Yeah.
here's the three things I do at every. It's
Yeah.
it's creating a vibe really,
Hmm.
which is look, you're gonna let me into your house. And I love meeting people at my house too. So sometimes my kids walk by or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like I'm going deep inside your family. So we might want to break bread together, or
Hmm.
uh, so that's I'm talking about removing that businessy vibe,
Yeah.
and um, and creating a trust really fast.
Hmm.
Some people it works with, some people are they're shopping for a photographer, but
Yeah.
um, it's amazing how, if I get an inquiry, I'll write back to people like, let's talk on the
Yeah.
phone because I'm not flying across the country without knowing who I'm talking to. And I don't have those forms on my website that some people do. I just think that's too businessy. And
Hmm.
we once thought about doing a more creative form, like, you know, what character would you be, or
Yeah.
would you be a lion or a dolphin or something like that, to get into their personality. But now I just say, let's just chat about your wedding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can learn so much from that. And I mean, that's how you learn the most, obviously. But if you are having that conversation and you're being flowy and honest with them, you'll know immediately if that's not like some people just want to hire a vendor and check it off the list, right? And then that's not your people. Or it might be your people. Like you have to know what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that I'm not Amazon. I don't want click to buy. And
Yeah.
so it's, it's, this is fun stuff to talk about because I don't think people necessarily have thought it through that way, or turned it upside down and questioned it. I think that's the
Hmm.
game we're playing. Like,
Yeah.
what other ways are there to approach this? Because if you really think about it, I'm shooting your wedding, I meet you one time, maybe we do an engagement picture. The next time I see you, it's going to be in a house, and our first interaction will be when somebody's in a half state of dress, somebody's in a, you know, it's a weird first
It
day
really
of
is.
work. It's like I'm working at your company and you're the boss, and I'm going to see you, coming out of
Mostly
the whatever.
naked.
So and then often I meet people, I don't really know what much about them
Hmm.
until after their wedding. And it's that reverse thing. Then maybe we meet up and have dinner after the wedding. And then it's like, oh, is that what you do for a living? I never really knew that. Or I know your uncle, I know your family, but I didn't know that this was really your side passion. Or so
Yeah.
it's a very odd way of making friends, but I've made amazing friendships out of weddings, incredible friendships.
Is that one of the like through lines in your work is that you end up having this intimacy with the whole family or with a couple specifically?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do family portraits and family
Hmm.
documentary stuff, and it's if you run into them on the street 20 years later, it's like
Yeah.
experience something really crazy together. So
Yeah. Has it
uh,
always been like that?
yeah, what other job is like that too?
No, I mean in terms of your interaction with your people. It's always been like that for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not every couple,
Hmm.
but it's more and more. Yeah, certainly in the early years, I was just taking different jobs, but I learned who my people were, and now I attract those people.
Hmm. Who are your people?
People who love photography, people who love um, they don't want to micromanage. They're imperfectionists.
Hmm.
They don't want the perfect.
Hmm.
They um, they're courageous, and um, they're designing their life. So they're designing their wedding. So they're choosing their photographer early. It's
Hmm.
like photographer is often a really important choice. So they prioritize me, and once I know that about them, it's like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm gonna crank at your wedding because
Because you have their trust,
yeah,
right? You know that they immediately and
beautiful.
instantly trust you, and you
Yeah,
have to reciprocate. Yeah.
I'm sure Holger will tell you about this thing where we often at smaller weddings in particular, we talk to people about, it's like, put me at a weird table with your cousins, seat me at whatever, because then I'm in the wedding, then I'm not outside, I'm inside.
Yeah.
Don't send me to the vendor tent by the porta potties.
Yeah.
And some people get it and some really get it. And it's an extraordinary shift from vendor to talent, or vendor to, without being too woo about it. It's just like, I'm gonna, and some photographers love to get a break and get away from people, but it's like I'm in.
Hmm.
So I've been in all day and then you're kicking me out. That's weird. So why
Yeah.
don't you just give me a seat?
Yeah. I'll have
I'm a
the
good
fish,
I'm
please.
I'm a good wedding guest. I'll laugh at the jokes and
Yeah, I think the speeches are my favorite part of a wedding.
really.
Yeah, because that's where it all comes together. Like the things that I've been seeing and the things I've had like a sense to photograph. I'm like, yeah, that is like something the best man will say in his speech, or like the dad will refer to it. Him as a kid, I'm like, right on. Yeah, I'm doing, and then the dancing starts or the partying starts, and then I'm even more emboldened because I'm like, I understand you even more now. Like it's just where all the puzzle pieces come together in those speeches if they're good.
Well, I do think that points to this um, way of looking at a wedding like a mystery.
Hmm.
All these, you get these clues, and the the mystery doesn't get solved, but you have some understanding of these people. You get the puzzle pieces,
Right.
and they do come together. You're right. It's like, oh, and for me, there was a thread at a lot of weddings that I noticed early on where there was somebody missing at a wedding. There was a sibling who drowned, or there was a grandfather who was sick, or there was a best friend who couldn't make it because his plane, didn't take off or something. There's that sense of loss or melancholy was
Hmm.
so beautiful and poignant, and it's like, oh, I don't know what happened, but there's some trauma in this family.
Yeah.
This wedding is healing that trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can be together
Yeah,
and share that, right?
Yeah,
Oh, sharing it.
everyone in the everyone in one family knew the story. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody had committed suicide or something, but there's the reference, and the puzzle gives you this clue, and it doesn't matter what it is, but it's recognizing that that's in the air, and that's poignant. It's a lot of poignancy going around.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. For sure. Poignancy is such a good word for it. Was that were there any other kind of big or impactful shifts that kind of brought you to where you are, or how you move through your career?
I think that there's a lot of little ones. I definitely always expected there'd be big ones like in the
Hmm.
movies, and I've had big campaigns go up, and then I come out on Friday, and then Monday morning nothing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, there was a, I must say, in 2008, when the recession hit hard, I was still sharing office with Holger and my other friend Philippe, and that was one of the biggest impacts because the our wealthy clients stopped spending, and uh, it's when I realized as a freelancer there's no safety net.
Hmm.
So I always had this image of that I'm a freelancer, so I'm in a canoe in the middle of a big lake, and just keep rowing, and then you get to the other side eventually. Just we just work hard.
Hmm.
And then 2008, I looked down and there was no canoe, and I'm just
Oh.
with a paddle with three kids, and I
Oh,
just it
wow.
was such an intense thing of what happens when the phone stops ringing. You send yourself an email to make sure the email works, and like,
Right.
oh, we have no, the job stopped, what do you do?
Right.
Like, I was incredibly unemployable,
Yeah.
zero skills.
I was
Couldn't
thinking
do
about that actually this
carpentry,
morning.
couldn't do office work. Like, what could I literally nobody would hire me for anything. So it just made me really power through it. And I didn't, I was kind of saved by a couple of former brides who were creative directors who called me for kind of year-long jobs. But
Hmm.
without those two, it just would have been just so stressful. And it's, whenever I think about it, I always want to tell photographers, keep your overhead low, because recessions come every 10 years. And
Yeah.
don't, if last year was a great year, just squirrel away some and
Squirrel
keep
it
your
away.
low.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think some of the best advice that was ever given to me as a photographer was to have a tax fund.
Yeah.
Like all that money comes in, I put 30% away. Like I don't even look at it. It goes away. And then I'm not panicking. There's a little bit of a kitty if things are slow. But I think the other piece in there, John, is the power of community and connections, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's
Those.
no, it's a completely a unique thing to the wedding industry
Mhm.
because of the 2.4 million weddings. It's a collaborative, and you can only be in one place on September 10th. So, you have your crew of people you share with, and um, yeah, it's been an incredible thing to go to a wedding conference and just see. You can sit at any table and talk to people who have this shared DNA and this shared kind of
Mhm.
fascination with weddings. Um, and my family's fairly sick of me talking about weddings, so it's nice to find people to go to these events and talk weddings, because otherwise they're like blah 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 blah.
I always come home and tell my husband all about it. I'm like, oh, and that this couple was like this, and because I just love seeing how the generations come together and like seeing the mannerisms and facial expressions that are similar between the generations and just feeling that sense of of like adventure that they're all embarking on together, and these new relationships that have formed. So Jay here's all about them. He's a very good listener. But yeah, it's just so energizing and in like
But it does make sense that that people outside of the industry would not they're just putting up with us because it's only that we know what all those little things mean. It's like how people look alike and gesture alike and stuff. If you're not spending your bulk of your year fascinated by weddings, then it's kind of like hearing they talk about golf or skiing or
yeah, totally.
yeah.
But I think that like that's one of the gifts that we have as photographers
Yeah.
is to help, like, because those are such universal things, right? Even if it's not something that you enjoy your wife sitting and telling you about at 11 o'clock at night, a really good photo is going to let anybody understand that,
Yeah.
and appreciate that, because we felt that too.
Yeah.
That's the awesome thing about photographing relationships, is that we all have experience in them. We all have experience with family. And we can see ourselves in those universal experiences, right?
And do you ever take notes at a good speech, like tips on a marriage and stuff? Because people are always giving tips on marriage. I probably should have kept notes.
I probably should have kept notes. There's been a few that I referred. The one that like sticks out for me is that marriage is work. Like, you have to work at it.
Right.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
often reminded of that.
And the young couple is just sitting there going, what? No,
What?
not tonight.
You know, see you in 14 years. Well, John, we've been chatting for a bit, and I just deeply appreciate you being here. Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked, and I'm glad you're a superb conversationalist. So I'm sure that's your superpower as a photographer, is making people comfortable.
Thank you, sir. It's shared. All right. I hope John has inspired you and motivated you to consider why it is that you're doing this, and to start asking yourself more questions than finding answers. It's not necessarily about answering something, my friends. It's about asking the right questions. And with that, I will talk to you next episode. Really looking forward to bringing you a coaching tip from this, and I hope you have a most beautiful day.